Welcome to Physician Heal Thyself, the podcast, empowering you to take a whole person approach to your well-being, spirit, soul, and body. Join me, your host, Dr. Lara, naturopathic doctor, entrepreneur, and a servant of Jesus Christ. We are not just a body, we are spirit and soul. It's time to integrate medicine and spirituality into our healing. Let's get started. Welcome back to Physician Heal Thyself, the podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Lara, and today I have a special guest, Dr. Jessyca Franco-Chavez. She's a naturopathic medical doctor, and she is the chief medical officer of the Healing House Concepts. And there's many special things about Dr. Jessyca. We are colleagues. We went through medical school together, and so I actually am going to bring her on so that she can share a little bit about herself before we proceed onto our conversation of the future of naturopathic medicine and the movement on Make America Healthy Again. So welcome, Dr. Jessyca.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Oh, thank you.
I'm really excited to be here. Yeah.
So thank you for taking the time.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so privileged and honored to be here and sharing information about other ways that naturopathic doctors can be of service. And now in this MAHA movement that we all hopefully have heard about and recognize, I say health doesn't take a side. So we're not promoting a slogan of any particular party, but it's more of awareness and integration of more wellness and natural healing ability, and talking about food as medicine and how we can prevent disease and combat some of the large percentages of illnesses that are happening to our people here in America and our children, right? And so my platform has kind of evolved. We like Dr. Lara said, we went to naturopathic medical school together when it was SCNM. So now it's Sonoran. People might recognize that name a little bit more, but we had a great experience there together, integrated our classes, and I was the class president at the time. I think you were the class president of your cohort that you had. So we had integrated that, and that really kind of sparked my appreciation for more advocacy, I'll just say, and listening to people and really having to be bipartisan in a medical school setting classroom, taking in what people had to say, really trying to reflect and register how I could portray that information to the higher ups, the deans or the president or whomever we were having a discussion with. And it really gave me a profound understanding for multiple personalities and multiple avenues of thought, and then being able to kind of dissect that and break it down, and aiming to be graceful and mindful at the same time, that I'm not just representing my opinion, but I am really, the spokesperson for a larger body. And so I soon then started with Student Government Association, SGA, there at the school. And I was lucky enough to go to a DC Fly event hosted by AANMP, which is the American Association of Naturopathic Physicians. And it's a yearly legislative effort for lobbying days in the spring. And it was a really cool experience then, because it was my first time going to DC and having these asks, right, to go into these congressmen and women's office and have a formal meeting with people that can actually impact change at the federal level. And so that really was something that I kind of bit me, right, of, this is interesting. This is where healthcare and policy meet that fork in the road. And then what does it look like afterward, and how can we continue to pursue having a voice and advocating for our medicine? Because our medicine, history has shown since 1910, Flexner Report, Rockefellers, it has been suppressed to a certain a large degree. And so within this kind of MAHA structure, again, I feel like it's imbibed this whole recognition of our medicine. And whether you want to call yourself a MAHA doctor or not, there are very profound similarities when you take the movement, this grassroots movement that was really a slogan, and for whatever purposes that parties have, they used it, but it has melded into this more appreciation for prevention, whole health, chronic disease awareness, and food as medicine. And then, of course, looking at some of the things that people may recognize in the media right now are the petroleum-based food dyes and all of the things that RFK Jr. now, as Secretary of Health and Human Services, is aiming to reduce the cost burden of these artificial foods, but also on a grander scale, reduce the chronic disease that we see associated with these types of preservative-laden foods. And so that's kind of where my story kind of evolved. I went back after we graduated in 2017. I'm from New Mexico. And so I thought, well, of course I'm going back home. I have to serve my people, and this is where I belong. But I recognize that the state is not licensed for naturopathic doctors. And so for those of you that may be aware, we are licensed in 26 states and territories as of today, but that hasn't always been the case, right? It's been state by state. And so in 2019, I was part of the robust, small but robust, I say, group of naturopathic doctors that moved back to New Mexico. And they were really excited and up for the challenge of getting us licensed. And I was part of that cohort. And so after, a few years here and there doing what we needed to do, talking to our local Health and Human Services, talking to the New Mexico Medical Board, the Pharmacy Board, Chiropractic Board, all of the committees, whether it be on the Senate side or the House of Representatives, countless meetings with the attorneys and our lobbyists. And I just, this blossomed another understanding of, whoa, this is how complex that legislative effort and politics can be, right? And so we got our state licensed with a robust scope of practice as a Naturopathic Practice Act bill in 2019 under the New Mexico Medical Board. And that was a game changer for all of us. There was a few of us in the state, and now to date there's 33. And I think we'd have a lot bigger of a population of naturopathic doctors here, but the COVID era kind of, slowed us down for obvious reasons, and transition efforts and advocating and whatnot. And so soon after that, however, we also credentialed for Medicaid, which is in a rural state like ours, very, very important. And so that took a while to do so, but we got that under our belt. And so obviously able to serve our Medicaid population of patients. We are one of only 5 states that are licensed in naturopathic medicine that actually have credentialing for Medicaid. And so this past DC Fly, that was one of our asks, is to say, hey, in the states and territories that we are licensed, please help us serve our people, because one of the top priorities of the MAHA Commission executive order signed by President Trump in February of this year was that we have a primary healthcare practitioner shortage. And so to help fulfill these initiatives and these pillars of health, we obviously need the population, that microcosm from that federal initiative, to be able to serve these people, our people, the population. And so that was one of the asks, and it was beautifully aligned that we kind of just centered it around, hey, if we're aiming as a America to help propel this MAHA, Make America Healthy Again initiatives, then we absolutely need help. and naturopathic doctors should be at the forefront because we are chronic disease experts. We have the most robust and highest level of clinical nutrition hours. So I believe we take plus or minus, depending on the school, right, 220 clinical nutrition hours. And other other MDs or DOs or nurse practitioners, MDs and DOs, I think, take 0 to 10. And then nurse practitioners can take somewhere around 70 to 80. And so, of course, that still varies, right, from wherever you come from. But the takeaway from that is that we are truly the experts in clinical nutrition, and we should have a seat at the table when it comes to recognizing what these federal initiatives and these executive orders have put in place. And so that just, again, propelled me into serving my people here in New Mexico. I started the Healing House of New Mexico Wellness Center, and it was a 5-acre healing facility. And I had everything from a food medicine cafe to a medical apparel store, a big apothecary with all kinds of herbs and remedios from New Mexico, and local honeys and things that people would bring and we would sell all together. And then, of course, I had my naturopathic medical practice. So I saw a lot of patients just as a primary care practitioner. And that was challenging because you want to see, I don't know if you've had this like fork in the road of who you're trying to serve and how you're trying to do it and what you want to kind of focus on. And to be honest, I have the utmost respect for GPs, general practitioners, or doctors that see everything and everybody. And in my aim to do that, I started to kind of understand, okay, I need to step back and I need to really get concentric on what it is I resonate mostly with. I would love to stitch everybody up and do all these other things, but it was taking a lot of time and energy. And so that was a recognition and realization the first time around. And I was the chief medical officer of over 21 practitioners. So I had every practitioner you can imagine under the Healing House, and everybody had their room and their focus. And some would be, master fire Reiki practitioners, and some were nurse practitioners. And so we'd have gong ceremonies, we'd have yoga therapy sessions, we had a Himalayan salt therapy room, and we shipped over 4,000 pounds of Himalayan salt from Pakistan. Wow. And my husband built beautiful, this cave of Himalayan salt, and it's kind of what we had before the Himalayan salt was kind of a craze, right, in early 2018. And so, yeah, we created this beautiful complex where people could come and stay, and I would have patients coming in and staying with us anywhere from a couple of days to a couple of weeks. And we just really kind of give them a schedule of what their daily, they'd go in and they'd see me in the morning, and then they do yoga in the afternoon. And then we would create a whole menu. So I created everybody's menu for them, food medicine, so wild, whimsical foods, but it was all with the holistic approach in mind, right? Anti-inflammatory, gluten-free, some would be vegan. And so we catered to them in that regard. And we had a great run. And then we sold the medical center during COVID. And so that was a challenging time. But nonetheless, silver lining is that we moved closer into the city. And so now we're in Corrales, New Mexico. And that's kind of the green belt of Albuquerque. Albuquerque is our major city here in New Mexico. And it's a farm community. And I always joke, there's a lot of dirt roads, but the main paved road, it's still 30 miles an hour because we have horses that are on the road with the vehicles. Yeah. So it's a really great place to serve people. And I think this is where we were meant to be all along. And we did buy another fairly large property, and we just got my practice, my office building completely rehabbed, 200-year-old adobe, the walls were crumbling off, and this is where I'm sitting. And so I have a couple of exam rooms and an apothecary again, and then another couple of practitioners working here as well. And so that's kind of what I've been creating these last couple of years on the personal front. But on the advocacy front, about a year and a half ago, I just had this intuitive dream and thought come into my mind. And it was like, you need to reach out and you need to kind of figure out what RFK Jr. is doing. And this was kind of out of the blue. I mean, I had known about him. I went through, a lot of environmental understanding and policy. He was the one that had sued Monsanto, and I really had an affinity for some of the understanding he had around autism and autism research and the autism community, specifically guided by moms, because I have a couple of family members that, have autism that they're living with. And so that was something that I was really aiming to understand a little bit more and kind of see what
now,
he was
Dr.
doing about
Jessyca,
it.
with the moms, and I work with this population as well. What was their experience when they noticed a change in their child? Were they able to identify? Yeah, it was after getting these round of vaccines that I noticed a change in my child.
So from some of the autism networks and some of the founders of these organizations, they have, hundreds and hundreds of families that are part of their community. And the mainframe story is within hours to the next day, my child was not my child anymore. Mm-hmm. Like there was a drastic shift. And the moms are like, we don't question us. We know our child better than anybody. And we saw this drastic change and shift going from being, maybe talking, depending on if it was a toddler, if it was an older child, talking to completely nonverbal within hours. And then having kind of like irrational emotions and tantrums and screaming fits. And so it was something, we now know there's this neuroinflammation that is needing to be studied a little bit more, and to kind of highlight what HHS is aiming to do is RFK Jr. really has had the background of being able to explore this. And so he's saying, hey, because we have all these questions, we need to start investigating and trying to help frame some of these answers. And so if we need to start studying, and it's not just, I think he gets pigeonholed into, it's just vaccines. No, it can be a lot of things. And he's mentioned that, there's a lot of other environmental factors, causative factors, inflammatory factors that the child maybe is having some type of methylation or detoxification issue, and they're not able to take in everything that's coming into their body. Maybe it's the food, maybe it's the quality of food, maybe they're living in a home that, has some type of mold or perpetuating environmental toxin. And so he's saying, hey, well, if we don't know, and we're seeing the rise of autism. So in like the 1950s, 1960s, unfortunately, we have to do retrospective studies to try to kind of understand what the percentages were back then, because we didn't have the DSM-3 that categorized clinically autism until the 1980s. And so in these retrospective studies that they've done with what we have today's understanding, they say, 2 to 4 children out of every 10,000 children had autism back then. Well, now, as of 2025, it's 1 in 31 children in the United States that has autism. And I like to highlight California, because as California goes, so goes the United States. Mm-hmm. 1 in 12.5 male children have been diagnosed with autism. And so looking at the profound incidence, you have to consider what are we paying attention to and what are we not paying attention to? And if vaccines need to be studied a little bit more, and we need to give effort and time and attention to a potential causative factor for some children, then that's what we need to do. And I'm all for that. People should have the choice, in my opinion, as long as there's true informed consent that we can stand by and that we trust our agency to be really doing the double-blind placebo-controlled studies, then let's do what we can to help our healthcare system along, because right now it's not there.
It's not there, and unfortunately, parents are not getting true informed consent at all. It's just, this is the vaccine schedule. Your child is 2 months. We're going to pump them with these vaccines, and that's it. And it's disturbing to me, because we know as naturopathic medical doctors in our training, we did learn all of these things. We learned what true informed consent is and what it consists of. And there is no medical clinic out there that's doing that. As a mom, when I first, my oldest is 15, but when I went to their office, they never gave me consent. Now, I was informed before. I came in already informed and educated, and so I knew what my decision was going to be. And my decision was going to be, I'm waiving all vaccines, examine my child, just do the wellness check. And, most parents don't take the time to inform themselves. More parents are educating themselves and reading on what are the ingredients, what are the potential effects of it. And the pediatrician was really nice. After the first couple of visits, she said, absolutely, we'll respect your choices, and so, and they made me sign something like saying that I understood the risk I was taking by not giving her a vaccine. So then why don't doctors do the same on the flip side and say, these are the vaccines they're getting, here's the ingredients, here's the inserts, here's the potential side effects, risk, and so forth. They don't, because they know that their patients are probably going to be freaked out and not do it. And I think as naturopathic doctors, we are the experts in lifestyle medicine, that we have a lot of training, a lot of education on how to raise healthy, children. Mm-hmm. And so when I get parents in my office who are choosing not to, vaccinate their children, I support them. And then at the same time, we talk about the importance, right, of how important is it for them to eat a healthy diet, for the mom to nurse, because we know that breast milk is going to be, that is where they're going to develop their immune system the best way. And they're going to develop a lot more, just better overall. And so they have to understand also, like, don't introduce the food coloring and the processed foods to your child's diet. If you start off from the beginning, from a clean slate, they will develop those healthy behaviors and patterns as they become adults, and they'll understand why they eat this way. One of the things that I am really excited about this movement, most people who know me would think that it's the vaccine part, which it is, but it's cleaning up our food. It's so important that we have real food. I'm sure you're aware of this. You hear it from your patients or other people. But we have that patient that here in the country, they can't have gluten, they can't have dairy, they can't have anything. They're very sensitive. They have all these side effects from what the foods they eat. Then they go to Italy and they eat bread and pasta and all the pastries, and they have no side effects of the food they're eating. The moment they arrive back to the country, they're at it again. They're having the bloating and the gas and the diarrhea and so forth. So there is definitely something that is really off with our food here, the quality of our soil, our air, our food, what's allowed in our food. I'm excited about the legislative changes that are going to come. And we've started already to see some of those, the legislation come through of getting rid of the food dyes. But what I hear, Dr. Jessyca, is like, when it comes to implementation, how realistic and at what pace do you do we anticipate seeing that? Have you gotten any perspective on your, experiences working at the legislative level?
Yeah. So I started, just to kind of give a backstory of how I'm linked to the MAHA movement.
Oh,
I
yeah.
started working with RFK Jr. Like a year or so ago, and I was just doing grassroots. I was like, what can we do in New Mexico, to support this independent candidate? And that's kind of, I've never been in that political realm where I'm like, oh, I'm Republican or I'm Democrat or I'm this or I'm that. I've always been very open-minded and self-reliant on what makes sense to me at that time. But knowing him and his history, I thought, okay, I need to explore this. I'm having this intuitive pull. So I started doing all of this data analysis and ballot access stuff in New Mexico. And then soon after, they interviewed and they wanted to hire me as a New Mexico director. And so I was like, okay, of course, I'll do it. I'm already kind of engaged. I've started this movement here in New Mexico just by happenstance. And then they interviewed me for a regional position. And so I became Southwest director for the Kennedy campaign, the Team Kennedy campaign. And so that's when I really started to kind of be involved and have weekly meetings with the higher up, and RFK Jr. would come on these meetings. And so it was just a whole other understanding of how we get from point A to point B with a political candidate, and him being on the more understanding functional medicine preventative side. There was a naturopathic thread in there, and we ended up hosting him here in New Mexico for his Recovering America premiere. It was this last July of 2024, and it was on his personal experience with addiction. And so it's on YouTube. It's a great documentary for those that are interested in looking at it. But really what the highlight was for me is that when I presented, and I was there during that whole thing, and I presented and we were talking about healing farms. And that's really where he's going at it with this whole addiction. Addiction has taken over so many of our people in our communities, and on a daily basis, I can't remember the number, but the numbers are crazy, right? And these are things that can be prevented. And so he's like, if we have these healing farms and we're able to integrate these people into a community that is a way of life, they're working on the farm, they're cleaning up their act in food, in social life, in all of these aspects. It just makes sense to have these in rural America and to try to see if this can be a staple. Well, interesting. My healing center was very focused on that. We grew our own herbs and food and had our food medicine cafe. And so that spoke dear and near to my heart. And so it's kind of like, before MAHA had a name, we had already kind of begun these conversations of MAHA at this level. And so that's kind of where my efforts at the legislative level can be seen through MAHA. And so to kind of go back around to your question, the executive orders that President Trump put together really highlight what that platform and commission embodies. And it is chronic disease prevention, having a comprehensive strategy. What they have put in place, it's just not like, okay, let's just kind of see what can happen. No, they have strict assessments that are ongoing, 100 days for what it's looking like for children in their schools and their school lunches. And then at 180 days, just about September, which people may have heard in the media, that's where they really want to have a strong hold on what the autism spectrum looks like from a not just preventative standpoint, but from the causative factor standpoint. and being able to have a little bit more knowledge and understanding to speak on the scientific method and scientific approach of why we're seeing such astronomical, percentage growth in autism yearly. And so they are putting all of these together, but really within this whole framework of HHS, they've created what's called AHA, and it's the Administration for a Healthy America. And so this agency, along with CDC, NIH, FDA, and of course, RFK Jr. kind of being the ringleader of all of it, they're charging forth with making sure that these pillars of health are enforced and followed through by a MAHA caucus. And the MAHA caucus was just announced recently by Senator Marshall. And I believe there's 5 senators and about 12 House of Representatives that are collaborating on this. And they're really in charge of making sure that all of this gets from federal to state to other agencies to empowering other, let's just say, grassroots or mobilizing legislative priorities with all of these other sectors of health agencies. And so that's kind of how we're going to ensure that some of these things can happen and that we are being as advantageous and proactive as possible in making sure that we're structured enough so that these things can happen at the micro levels of government and the micro levels of community, right? Because we, the people, have a voice and we can make change and we can talk to our patients. And then we're just seeing this ripple effect of understanding. And so, again, anybody that goes into such a high level position or that has that level of responsibility, it's hard to criticize. You don't know all of the other behind the scenes things that are happening and really who has their hand in a controlling factor of it. But I do believe that we've made a lot of headway thus far. And even with the petroleum-based synthetic food dyes that Dr. Marquet had announced, a couple of weeks ago, by 2026, there's like 5 or 6 food dyes that are going to be hopefully completely out of some of the American food diet.
So will these dyes be completely illegal for manufacturers to use in their products that they make? Is that the goal?
Like, yeah.
They're making it like illegal, like you can't even use this. Mm-hmm. And then of course there's the who's overseeing that. There is, you're absolutely right. When there's a change, anytime we want to make a change, it does have to happen at the legislative, political level. That's where you make impact for everyone in a positive or negative way if we're not careful. But it is a very involved process to create change. Mm-hmm. So you have these leaders at the top making these decisions, signing policies that they're moving these, they're creating these changes, but it takes time. Right. And it's a process of getting things, properly through it. What are some of the things that you're seeing, Robert F. Kennedy getting pushback, or I'm sure there's many things he's getting pushback and challenged on because he came in with a list of things he wants to do that we're in agreement with. And of course we know that there's going to be the opposition, right? The adversity, the challenges that he has to fight through. What are some of the top things that you're seeing that he's struggling to get his points across?
I think he has to be very neutral when he's explaining certain things. And I know he's had data on vaccine injury. I think the COVID vaccine has been kind of a bone of contention or confusion in the nation and throughout media. And whether you believe whomever spins it a certain way based on their agenda, that's for your perspective. But I do think that he has had the most ridicule about the COVID vaccination to date. He was kind of one of the ones in the beginning saying, hey, I've seen some of the VAERS reporting and the adverse reactions and deaths that I'm hearing from people in my cohort, and this is of concern. And so that's something that even, when he was vying for the position and he was going through all of the committee hearings and whatnot, he had to play it safe. And I do know that there's more evidence and research that's going to be coming out in the near future, because it's there. It's so astounding, but I think he has to be a little bit, conservative on that approach, just so that he doesn't turn people off, and that he can just kind of seat himself in a way where he's starting to be looked at as an authority and not as somebody that's just still holding that conspiracy theory, flag.
Now, if we have so many doctors and scientists that are speaking up, at least on social media platforms, whether it's on podcasts or YouTube and, of course, all the other platforms, I hear so many of these experts, like doctors who are very well versed in immunology and, even vaccine production, and they've seen the trend of what it caused. Are any of these doctors making these, legislative calls? Are they making themselves known to these, politicians and explain their? I know there are some, but are there enough people that are saying this is what we're seeing clinically or in labs? Like, there's a correlation here that should be looked into and do more research. Have more people come forward on the political aspect?
That's a good question. So he has, there's different kind of levels of his supportive network and group. And the people that have been appointed to HHS, of course, a little bit more well-known, like Dr. Bhattacharya and Dr. Oz for CMS. And Dr. Bhattacharya was one of the, I guess it would be called founders of that declaration right during COVID, where he was saying, hey, the Barrington Declaration, that, hey, we deserve to have a little bit more understanding before you roll out these different levels of pharmaceuticals, whether it be vaccines or whatever the approach may be. We need a little bit more informed consent and safety provisions. And so he has been kind of highlighted since the beginning as one of the people that were standing behind the curtain saying, wait a second, is this safe? Is this safe? Is this safe? And so he's now, it was great to see that he got appointed. And the other couple that are kind of more behind the scenes, but are still really working on the clinical aspect of it, Dr. Robert Malone. And so he was one of, for all intents and purposes, one of the inventors of the mRNA technology. And so he really is one of the dear advisors of RFK Jr. and really making sure, that things are getting brought to light in a certain way. And then Dr. Ryan Cole, he was really one of the first physicians doing the autopsy reports after COVID deaths, and kind of seeing, there's some oddities and curiosities that we're seeing that just doesn't line up. And so, of course, all of these people, and then Dr. Peter McCullough, he is one of, I think, world-renowned when it comes to heart, cardiac research.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly, in Texas. And so he has the McCullough, and his chief researcher is always bringing new research and saying, hey, we need to look at this, we need to look at that. So they're at the forefront, and I know for a fact that they're all collaborating and making sure that all of this, from whatever level of government, even if it's universities, right? Because the NIH and the funding and the grants, and most universities do most of our research, that they're all in talks and making sure that we're not missing anything when it comes to a lone scientist or doctor in the corner researching something and then it not being able to be brought to light. Yeah. So I think it's a more comfortable environment for being able to kind of speak to the science, whether, science should be debated and deliberated. And if it's repeatable, then that's where I think HHS is really trying to change that. People can have, in Switzerland, let's just say they come up with a curious signaling that is something that needs to be researched more, maybe because it could cause harm. And so all of these signals in the scientific community, just because some community discovers it, scientific community discovers it, doesn't, HHS and FDA and NIH and all of them don't just need to sign off on it. They need to actually do a reproducible, repeatable research within their own environment. Yeah. And if that can be done and we can start assessing the efficacy and safety, then there we go. That's where the scientific method and the standard of science comes. And people can debate and deliberate and question. And science has always been founded on questioning. You should question it, right? You should be able to think it through and question it. That's how we learn. That's how we collaborate. That's how we get better. And I just hope that people can kind of reflect and step back and say, hey, instead of shaming it like, oh, this is taking too long, or, it's already been FDA approved, why would you go back? Well, we have to go back. Some of these studies weren't ever placebo controlled, or maybe the placebo itself was tainted in some way. And so again, being able to go back in time and saying we need to make sure that the products that we put out are the safest and the best that we can guarantee. And we've done everything that we know how to do.
Right. And I think we'll wrap up this episode and we're going to continue the conversation into the next episode. But what really needs to happen is that we need to restore back the integrity of these institutions in science. And if we do not restore that integrity, a lot of Americans, a lot of people all over the world are not going to be trusting of our political, our government, our scientific community, our medical community, because there's been, trust has been shattered amongst people, especially in the last 5 years. So I think, by establishing these processes in place and ensuring that the integrity that they're doing the research and, reproducing the research to see if it's safe and effective. And that's really the bottom line. Is this safe? Because if it's not effective, but it's not going to hurt me, I'm willing to try it. But if it's going to hurt me and it's not safe, then no. So we need to go back to the priority is this product or therapeutic safe for us to, provide it to all people who might be in need of it. So Dr. Jessyca, thank you for this segment of the conversation. We're going to continue, guys, continue the conversation with Dr. Jessyca as it relates to the future of naturopathic medicine and also this MAHA movement. So thank you for listening to this episode, and until next time, be blessed. Thank you for listening to Physician Heal Thyself, the podcast. If you like what you've heard, please like, share, and subscribe. Help this message reach more people who may need to hear it. Leave your comments. I want to know what you think. If you're interested in learning more about Raices, visit our website at raicesndmedcenter.com. Until next time, be blessed.